Hello and welcome to A Life of Creation. My name is Chad and I'm the host of this channel. Today I'm excited because we are talking to probably one of the best concert photographers that I know, Jered Scott. So let's get into it. Just use an overlay.
Sounds good to me.
All right. All right. Well, welcome to A Life of Creation. I'm here with Jered Scott, and he is going to share his story as a photographer and creator. And I think you do multiple things, right? At this point.
Most of us do, right?
Yeah. Gotta pay the bills.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well,
All right.
hello. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me here. And thanks for having me here in my house.
Yeah. So much easier this way, right?
Oh, yeah. Maybe not better, but easier,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
There's something about a studio, but maybe one
yes.
day.
And being together, right? I
Yes.
guess that's the fun part.
Yeah.
But this is a close second. So,
Yeah. I mean, we are basically opposite ends of the country at this point, so
yes. Yeah.
we'll take this as because that's what we can do.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll take it away. Let's hear your story.
Oh man, let's see. Well, I was born a young boy. No. Uh, let's see. Condensed creative story. Um, the end of high school, I wanted to play music. Tried to do that like around 2 years and didn't work out. Uh, as you know, as you don't know who I am, so didn't work out. Uh, but at the time, I was like, I had dabbled in some photography with a friend's camera and a friend's band. And when my band broke up, the other band that I had taken some photos of saw that I was like really heartbroken and really sad. Like it was like I got dumped. And they invited me to come hang out, like come to some of their out of town shows. And I wanted to hang, but I grabbed a friend's camera every time I went out of town with them and shot, a couple rolls of film. And I did not know what I was doing. I never learned camera settings. I never took it off program, I don't think. Um, but I was liking what I was getting, and so was the band. And so I think that was just like my random introduction into photography. Uh, Fast forward a few years, and I had a camera sometimes, and like I had traveled some and had it with me, and just kind of like took pictures. And again, didn't know what I was doing. And then I landed uh, at college in Southern California, a little bit older, trying to like finish up just my uh, major, and randomly got interested in photography. And my second year at school, my roommate was in a band, and I used that opportunity to like take photos of his band, and it was really fun. And then I needed to take like an art credit, that like an art history class, and my other roommate was like, the school goes to Italy for 3 weeks between semesters for like art history and art credits. You should look into that. So I went on that trip, and I was able to get on the trip because I expressed an interest in photography and told the art teacher that that would be like what I would do during the course of the trip. Like I would take photos, you know, I guess artistically. and be able to present them as like a portfolio. So I took photos every day for like 3 weeks, and I think that's what really helped me fall in love with documenting. Like, I
Right.
don't think that if I would have known that and told that at the beginning to the professor, I don't think they would have been as interested, because I don't think documentary photography or whatever is part of like an art major.
Right.
But I really just fell in love with like taking pictures of what was around me and taking pictures of like my classmates and like where we went. Um and so I got back from that trip, and I was just super interested in photography, and saw like a band was going to be playing in the gym at the school, like a big concert. I somehow got a photo pass. I shot photos. Um, a friend who was on like the school paper team or whatever is like their photographer. I saw his photos in that next issue of the school paper, and I looked at my photos and I was like, mine are better than that. Like, so maybe I can do this thing.
Right.
Um, and this is random, but the first day of our trip, we were in Rome, and at the end of our day, we were waiting for the tour bus to like pick up our group, and this other American dude just strolls on over and asks me, or I guess he didn't ask, he told me that he liked my t-shirt, and I looked down to see what I was wearing that day, and I was like, oh, thanks, it's just my friend's band from home. And he's like, where's home? And at the time, home was a small town in central-ish California called San Luis Obispo. And he was like, I'm from San Luis Obispo and I'm in a band there. And I was like, what band are you in? And he's like, I play in a band called Sherwood. And I was like, what? I'm like, I listen to you guys all the time. I didn't know you were from my town. He's like, yeah, we all go to Cal Poly. And I was like, oh my God. So a few months later, when I was now interested in photography, I saw that they were going to be playing in Anaheim, which was only a few minutes from where I lived. So I reached out on MySpace because, that was our tool back then. And I was like, hey, Dan, I don't know if you remember me. We met in Rome. I've gotten into photo. I'd love to like shoot your show. And he was like, absolutely. And so I got to shoot him or Sherwood and a band called May. And after the show, next couple days, like I edited photos. Had another friend who at the school knew May's manager because their singer had played at our school that year or something, and she was like the runner. And so she put me in touch with the manager, and I showed him photos, and he's like, can we buy these? And I was like, I could get paid to shoot music. Um, and it was like at that point that I was just kind of like, all right, I love this. Like, I missed being around music for years. I missed like not playing music, but I also knew that that wasn't like what I was really good at. Um, and all of a sudden I was like, this could be a thing. I think I'm going to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then it felt like, the next few months were a whirlwind, but like things just kind of started to fall in place
Yeah.
over and over and over. And I started working.
Yeah. Yeah. It it's crazy. I forgot that you did some stuff with Sherwood. I remember them on MySpace too. They were like the band, you know.
They were MySpace Records' first signed band.
Yeah. And they were
So
good. They were fun.
yeah, they're good pop, like pop,
Yeah.
whatever band.
Yeah, it's crazy how things just kind of fall in place once you just kind of go, okay, I'm going to give it a shot, and you see
Yeah.
doors open and close, and you kind of just like navigate, where to go.
Yeah. I don't know, like I can only speak for myself, but like the fun thing about being a photographer is I obviously have like these like tangible memories
Right.
because I've gone back into like hard drives and shoots and things like that. I feel like it's kind of easy to like trace things, like the thread from this to that to the next
Right.
thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like it's crazy that like going to Italy, meeting Dan, like really did open doors and like put me like I don't know, like out there. And I
Right.
mean, yes, like I think once you start, then it's like all about just continuing to like try to go with the flow.
Yeah.
But like I think I shot for that, or I shot that show, and then a few months later they were back, and they were on a different tour. I reached out again. They said yes, you can have a pass, and this time they were like second. And back then I was learning like whoever granted you the pass, you can usually shoot for them, and whoever played before them, but
Right.
sometimes not the
Not out
bands
there.
after them. And so that first show was at the Grove in Anaheim. And the second show that I did with them was at the Anaheim House of Blues, and a band that I had been listening to for, I don't know, 5 years at that point, 6 years at that point, that I really loved was playing before that. And it was the Rocket Summer. And I was like, oh, this is so rad. I get to shoot, photos of them. And so shot the photos, went up after their set to their merge table, talked to Bryce's wife, asked for a way to like get in touch. Back then I was just like, I'll send you photos if you want to use any, or like make it your MySpace profile. That would be awesome. And if you want to do anything past that, like we can talk about money, you
Right.
know. Um, and I sent photos, and the Rocket Summer loved what I sent, and they made one from that show, like their MySpace profile photo. And so I was like, that's amazing. It's
Yeah.
so cool. Um, and then a few months after that, Sherwood was back, and they were playing at what is it? Is it UC Fullerton? Right. Um, and they were playing with Shiny Toy Guns and some rapper. And I showed up to shoot with them. And uh the stage is built out on the football field, and it's starting, and it's still like pretty light outside. And this rapper gets up and he does like a couple of songs, and then he welcomes his friend to come and do a few songs with him. And his friend was Kanye West at his like introduction like stage, like Jesus Walks was his single.
Wow.
Um, and so the band and we were like, "Oh, that's Kanye West. That's amazing." And so when he got off stage, we kind of uh, got in his way and stopped him from getting back to his car. And we were like, "Hey, we're the band playing next." Like, that's what they're saying. Can we get a photo? And he's like, "Yeah, yeah." And so I took a photo of them with Kanye, and I posted it on my blog. And a couple days later, I got an email, and it was these gals that worked on a show that was on Fuse TV, and they wanted to use the photo in like a news, like a quick, and this happened this week,
Right.
like quick story. And so again, back then being brand new and trying to like make it and trying to figure things out, I was like, yeah, absolutely. What is there a budget? They're like, no, this is going to be on like at the show for like 10 seconds.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, yes, still. And then the gals got back to me about something, and I probably asked if there was any way to like get hired. They said they didn't have anything to do with that at the show,
Yeah.
but then it told me that they had like a blog, and they set up interviews and shoots, and they were covering like up and coming bands. And so they told me I could do some work with them. So I started covering, a couple of things in California, and then they would post it. And I saw it as like, opportunities to try to pitch things. And Another couple months had gone by. Rocket Summer was playing again. I wanted to do more with that band, so I pitched it to them. They said yes. So me and a friend drove up to Bakersfield. She was going to interview. I was going to do photos, and I got to do like a little photo shoot with Bryce, and then shot the show. And after the show, we were all hanging out, and I like awkwardly pulled out my phone to be like, I, just to connect dots. I just wanted to show you, like, here's your MySpace. Like, I took this picture for you. Bryce was just like, oh my God, like, we love this photo. It's so good. And he was like, are you coming to the show tomorrow in LA? And I was like, I wasn't planning on it. I don't have a pass. And he's like, oh no, you're on the list. Like, come tomorrow. So I went the next night and hung out. And then he was like, are you coming tomorrow night in Pomona? And I was like, I wasn't planning on it. And he's like, come hang out. I'll put you on the list. And I was like, okay. Show up in Pomona. I shoot. Afterwards, I go stand outside, and lo and behold, my friend Chad walked out.
I was gonna say, is that when I met you?
Well, I don't know if I think we had met before that, because I
Yeah,
think
yeah, we
maybe
had.
maybe not, but again, I hadn't done anything. Like, I hadn't done much. It was like still my first year. This had to have been like 2007, 2008 era.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking, and you were like, who are you shooting for tonight? And I was like, oh, well, I kind of just like for the Rocket Summer, like he asked me to come. And then I was like, what are you doing? And you were like, oh, I'm shooting for Alternative Press. They're they're doing some online stuff because this is their tour, and
Right.
I think it was like that one that he co-headlined with All Time Low.
Yeah,
And
I think so.
I was like, oh dude, I was like, I've been trying to shoot for Alternative Press. Like, don't I don't know. Like, I keep emailing, and like intern gets back to me and like asks me to
Right.
send him a portfolio, and I don't have a portfolio, so I send him the link to my website, and I never hear back.
Yeah.
And you were like, well, let me email my guy. Let me see what I can do. And the next day I got an email, and the guy was just like, why are you not shooting for us?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
probably Norman, right?
yeah, but I didn't know. I didn't know who
Yeah,
it was. I got an email back, and he's like, why aren't you shooting for us? I said, oh, I wrote him back. I said, I've tried. And I explained
yeah.
and how I wasn't getting anywhere. And he wrote back, and he's like, well, you talk to me now. And I was like, okay. Um, so that was like what it took to get me connected there,
Yeah,
and is a friend like you being like, oh, I'll email my guy,
yeah,
which I probably said it way back in the day, but again, thank you, Chad.
yeah, no problem.
Uh,
I didn't get many jobs after that. But I've thought of that and I was like, but I went in a different direction with my photography. And so I'm like, how cool is it that s- someone like you was able to step in and go this direction when I was starting to go that direction?
yeah,
And it was
yeah.
just, I'm like, I'd rather you than, some other person.
Yeah, well, which I think you bring up like an interesting thing is like we never know what's happening and what's going to
Yeah,
happen. And because of that, it can be a really like scary place to
yeah,
be an artist, right? Like you don't want to say no to anything, because if you say no, then you're like worried that whoever it is, if it's a band or an account or whatever, that they're not going to come back.
right.
And
Yeah, you no idea.
yeah, and you're afraid like if I pass along my friend's info, like, or somebody I know, maybe they get it, which is great,
Right.
but then maybe they build the relationship and then they're off and run. And so
Yeah,
I've found like early on, one of my friends had told me like his unsolicited advice was like, don't worry about yourself. He's like, just create worth in everyone around you
right.
and focus on everyone else. And so I tried to keep that like this whole time, you know,
Yeah,
and I think like experiencing it helps, right? So
yeah,
me saying to you just in passing, like, oh yeah, that hasn't worked out for me, and you being like, oh, I'll email him,
yeah. I mean,
and yeah,
I feel like, the industry is viewed as a very cutthroat thing, but I feel like the connections that I still hold dear are those who support everyone.
Yeah.
It's like I can't do this. You want to do it? Like, let's try and get you in
Yeah.
there. And it's like, oh, you don't know how to do that? Let me show you. Or, a buddy of mine, the guy I interviewed first for this, he does an acting and stuff, and he's like, I view success as I'm able to employ my friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm like, how, that's kind of like this simple thought, but you're like, what an amazing thing to be able to bless others.
Yeah.
Even when you're doing something you love to do, you're able to bless your friends too. And I'm a kind of I try and go with the flow too. So it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
I wasn't traveling as a tour photographer or anything. I was just doing kind of like the local stuff
Yeah.
and doing a full-time job. That was my thing, and I was happy with it and content with it. So
Right.
it was fun to see kind of like we'll probably get to it, but like you started taking off and like doing all these amazing things. It's like it was cool and fun to see.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, I had, as you, like, we all have our like contemporaries that we saw around Southern California.
Yeah,
Some of them blew up for a second, then disappeared. Some of them were amazing photographers and would have like a cool couple of features in like AP or
yeah,
something else. Again, disappear, change fields and be like, oh,
yeah,
I'm like commercial now, or I'm fashion, or and then there were people that like weren't that great and faded away. Like
yeah,
it runs, the gambit.
yeah,
And like you said, I think like it was just really nice, like when we met others that kind of like we all were in the same place where they're like, dude, I want to work hard. I want to like make cool shit and
yeah,
like do stuff. But also it's like about the hang. It's like
right,
the community. Like there are, half a dozen of y'all that like come to mind when I'm like heading to a show. I'd be like, oh, and I'm probably going to see so and so and so and so tonight. So like that's going to be awesome.
yeah,
And then as like things would develop, like there were times people would get hired to do something and then they'd hire me to like assist. Or there were times that I got to do cool stuff and then I turn and hire my photo friends
yeah,
to assist. And so yeah, I mean, definitely like, it was fun to find the like-minded people, build community, and then just kind of like be there
yeah,
for each other in different ways. But
yeah.
yeah.
You remind me like when I was shooting a lot, there's definitely like a core group of photographers that
Yeah.
I would see like all the time, and it's just like you knew you were going to enjoy the show, even if you didn't like the bands,
Sure. Yeah, because you
because
knew that,
I'm
yeah.
hanging out with cool people.
Yeah, you
You
knew
know?
that you were in the pit and like you're all for the most part like because you're all homies, like, we move around each other,
Yeah,
we give way to each other. I mean, I think I can't remember if it was that first Rocket Summer show at the House of Blues, but like that was like for me, it was like a really crowded photo pit and my first experience. I mean, I hadn't done a lot of shows at that point, but it
right,
was my first experience with like a jerk in the pit. Like this one photographer followed Bryce wherever he went because he knew like Bryce is the band, so he's
right,
the only one that mattered like to him. And wherever Bryce was on the stage, this guy was like right in front of him. And
yeah,
so it was a bummer because no one else
yeah,
was saying anything or doing anything and like couldn't get a good angle because this dude was just everywhere.
yeah,
And I realized then, like, yeah, they're like, we got to try to like work. But
yeah,
if we're all there with like a basic pass, like we're all there for like a blog or like a magazine or
right,
something small. So like we're all sort of in the same place. So like the etiquette should trump like the actual need
right,
for like, I got to get this shot.
Right.
And as you know, and stuff like that was stuff that I learned later too, of like, yeah, when you work with the band, that's when like getting the shot really matters.
Right.
And at that point too, you should probably have things like worked out with them to be like, where is the shot
Right.
during that?
Right.
But when you're just like, I got 3 songs, I got 7 minutes to try to get
Right.
what I need, like, you know, it
Yeah.
can feel that way, but that etiquette, like of like making sure you're not blocking people, making sure you're not hogging everything. Like I always try to remember like these people in the front row paid and waited hours and I'm in front of them. Like I shouldn't block them for very long.
Yeah.
Um,
Or the photographers who hold the camera like over their head.
yeah, and I'm guilty of that.
I
I'm
mean, we
guilty.
all are occasionally. I mean,
But
when the
yes,
stage is
but
10 feet.
yeah, we got to be mindful, do it quick, move
Yeah,
on, not to
exactly.
punish, one spot or whatever.
Keep your
But
elbows in a little bit more.
yeah. Yeah, but back to everything. So like it's wild to be like at that point when you connected me to AP, I I was so green and didn't know anything. Like I was just like be good, be kind, work hard, try to take cool pics, like, that was it. And and
But
then
the,
for me it was always just like throwing ideas out there and stuff. And so like I think before that show I had gone on a road trip over the summer with like one of my friends who was in my band out of high school, and then he had turned into a photographer. And I was like, hey, let me roll to Portland with you and like spend a couple weeks like just hanging out and taking photos and learning and whatever. So while we were there, I was looking up to see if there were any shows. And long story short, we went up to Seattle and I got to photograph MXPX doing like a in-store performance. And I sent photos to their email and got word back from Mike's mom, who was like kind of the manager at the time. And she loved what I sent and asked if she could put them on their website. And I was like, of course you can. Like, yeah. Uh, and then it was like I don't know, later that summer, maybe like September, they were playing outside fest in like San Diego. And I reached out to her and I asked if I could get a pass. And she said, absolutely. I went and shot again. And it was awesome. And it was just like little things like that where I just kept like pitching and pitching. And so fast forward to, I think that was like the fall. So I think it was like the following spring. Um, they played Bamboozle in California. So I went and hung out because I'd done a couple things with them at this point. And then I was talking to them and they were going to be like, a month or so later, they were on tour and they were going to be playing Bamboozle on the East Coast. And I was like, I think I'm going to be like doing my own trip. And I think I'm going to be in Nashville. And then like, could I come on the road with you guys for a few days? And they approved it. And so like I put this trip together. So then I was like, well, I've seen in one of the issues that like AP does like, on the road with an
mm,
AP photographer. So I sent Norman an email thinking he was the web guy and thinking maybe I could get some sort of like web feature because
right,
again, I'm like a year in.
right,
Um, and so I tell him what I'm doing. I'm going to be in Nashville. Then I'm going to go to the East Coast with MX. Uh, and that'll end at Bamboozle. And then I'll be done. And I was like, maybe you guys want to cover some of this or something. And he was like, yeah, I could probably get you a page in the magazine for that. And I was just like, amazing. And like got off the call, like little like trembling, just full of like adrenaline. And then I was like, who is this guy here at the magazine? So like out of order, right? Go grab the
yeah,
magazine, open it up, table of contents, Norman #2 publisher. And I was
yeah,
like, and so then I go on this trip and Norman tells me if there's anything happening wherever you are and you need help, let me know and I'll see what I can do. And so I was like, well, in Nashville, I see Thrice and Circus Survivor playing. Can you help? And he's like, before I could finish the sentence, he was like, done. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And um, so he helped me piece together a few things. Then when I like my first day in Nashville, um, woke up at the friend's house I was staying at, and he was like, yeah, before like I go anywhere, I normally just cruise across the street to my friends to get coffee. Like we just sit on his porch and drink coffee. Uh, and I was like, cool, like that sounds good. So we walk across the street, and his neighbor's Ethan Luck. And
Oh, nice.
I had met Ethan like in passing, and we
Right.
had been instant message friends for a minute. And all of a sudden, I'm on his porch and we're talking, and he had just become Reliant K's drummer. And I was telling him what I was doing in town, and he was like, you want to come to Ohio? We're playing a college show this weekend. And I was like, yeah. And so I went and shot Thrice on Friday night, and then went from the show to a parking lot, got on a bus for the first time, and ended up in Ohio the next day and shot a show. And they were like, we're about to put out like an EP, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to take some promo photos? And so the promo photos, and I'm just like, what is happening? Um, and then, finished up with them, finished up in Nashville, flew out, did a few days on tour with MXPX, got to shoot Bamboozle for the weekend. Like AP got me a pass so I could shoot for them for the weekend. Then the gals that I was doing stuff with their magazine, like I got to stay with them in New York. So I got to be in New York for my first time. Did another show, and then they had told me, they're like, oh, you should try to shoot this one. And I emailed Norman, and I think the 3 or 4 things that I had asked him for help with like were cakewalks.
Yeah.
And then this time when I emailed him, he was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to make that happen. And I was like, yeah, no problem. Uh, I was like, yeah, even if you could, I was going to have to like have you guys like pay to change my flight home and stuff like that. So no worries.
Yeah.
And then like a day or two later, he emailed me and he's like, we'll cover the change for your flight. He's like, I got you a pass. You can go shoot My Chemical Romance at Madison Square Garden. And I was
Dang.
just, okay. Which turned out I did not realize until like later, I don't know, years later, that that was the last night of the tour, and it was the last night of the Black Parade tour. So it was like
Oh,
a
wow. That was a
deal.
big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, how did I end up here in my first year? Um, but then like, because I'd spent those couple of days on the road with MX, they were talking about a cover album they were doing that summer, and I pitched an idea. I was like, oh, you know what? You guys should like dress up like all the bands that you're covering. And they were like, that's actually a good idea. And I was like, can I do it? And they said, sure. So I flew up that summer and got to shoot an album. And then they were talking about a tour they were doing in the fall where they were going to co-headline with Lagwagon. And I was like, whatever I have to do to be on that tour,
Right.
let me go on that tour. And we worked it out. And then I had built that relationship with Rocket Summer, and he was touring that fall, and his tour overlapped with theirs, but extended a little past theirs. So like I went on tour with MX for like 3 weeks, and I had one day off in Southern California, did laundry, flew to Florida, if I remember correct, and did a week, like the last week of, or two. I think I did 2 weeks with Rocket Summer. Did not have a day off, flew from that tour to New York and did a week on tour with Reliant K, all back to back. So like I
Dang.
think I was on the road for like 6 weeks. And in my head, I was just like, this is it. This is what it is. Like
Right.
this is amazing. Um, and I think that was like the fall of 2008. And then it was just continuing to like try to piece things together. And the spring of 2009, I was back in Nashville and hanging out with Ethan and some friends. And like we went to one of his friends' birthdays or something at a bar. And in walks their friend Steven Christian, the singer from Amberlin. He had just moved to Nashville and was, mutual friends with all these people. And him and I had done something tiny for like a mutual friends clothing thing. And so he came over and we were talking. And then all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, actually, how long are you in town?" He's like, I got asked by Alternative Press to like do this thing for a feature. Why don't you take the photos for it? And I was
Hmm.
like, I'd like to do that. That sounds fun.
Yeah. Let me
Hit
call
up
the guy. Let me call my
Yeah.
guy.
I hit up Norman because I was just like, I don't want to step on anybody's toes if
Right.
this is already like assigned
Booked.
out.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I didn't know you were in Nashville. Absolutely, do it. And he's like, we're doing this feature on, our favorite artists writing about their favorite artists. And so I went and did the photo of Steven. And then a couple days later, I flew down to Austin and was at South by for the first time and um, hung out for a few days there, did some work, shot a bunch of bands. And then as I was getting ready to leave Texas, Norman emailed and said, like, hey, when you get back to California, I've got two more of those artists I need you to shoot. And so I, I think I stayed in LA for like 2 days and I got to shoot with Jade, who plays in AFI,
Right.
and then Andrew McMahon of like Jack's Mannequin. And is it the starting line? No,
Wow.
something corporate. That's it.
Yeah.
Something. See, I'm bad with my bands.
Oh, I'm terrible.
So I got to do those. And then I went home and Norman was like, can you do one more? And I was like, no, I'm home. And I've been gone for like 3 or 4 weeks. Like, I just want to rest. And I was like, who is it? And he said who it was. And at the time, I wasn't familiar. So I was just like, yeah, I'll pass on that one. Then a week later, he wrote me back and he's like, hey, I still need this guy shot. If you can do it, I can make it more worth your time. I can give you one more when you go down to LA. And I was like, okay, who is it? And he's like, Mark Hoppus. And I was like, I'm in.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that was back when Blink was broken up. Like
Right.
no one knew if they were ever going to play again. And so I show up at Mark's studio while my friends are setting up. He walks me around the studio and he was tracking. And so he goes to introduce me to Motion City Soundtrack. And they're like, we remember you. And a few months prior, when I was in New York on that trip, I shot a show and I got to do a photo of them for like a AP Warp Tour catalog. And so they remembered me. And I was like, good to see you guys. Anyway,
Yeah.
we finished the shoot and I went right to my computer, emailed their people and was like, I saw the guys are in the studio. I'd love to hop in and like document or, album stuff. And they passed, but I did not want to let that go. So I went to the magazine and I was like, hey, you guys have this small section that says like, look who's recording, like send me down. Like it's Mark Hoppus and Motion
Right.
City. Norman was like, yeah, okay, I'll set it up. And so I got to go back and shoot and spend a day in the studio. And then it was like a few weeks after that, Norman calls and he's like, do you have this date available? I told him yes. And he goes, all right, can I can I can I book you to do something? And he's like, I need you to tell me yes before I can tell you any details. It's like, this is mysterious. I'm in. And he goes, all right, you can't tell anybody. And I was like, okay. He goes, all right, you're gonna go down, you're gonna shoot this like phone kickoff, launch, whatever. Some bands are gonna play. But the secret is at the end of it, Blink is gonna come out and play their first three songs back and like announce we're back. And I was just like, yeah, I'll do that. And I share all of this long-winded story to get to the point of a few months after, or not even a few months. It was like a month after that show. I got an email that led to a call with like Blink's merch company, and they wanted to buy a bunch of the photos to make flyer looking t-shirts for the upcoming tour. And they wanted more recent stuff since the band hadn't
Right.
played.
Yeah.
So just because of like random things and being out and saying yes and traveling and going, like I went from like year one starting to shoot a few bands that I like to year two, like shooting for Blink during their comeback and
Right.
like getting paid real money for the first time. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, this is crazy. So,
I mean, from the sidelines, I remember just like watching. All of a sudden, like your name was just everywhere. And I was like, "Holy cow!" It
yeah.
was amazing.
Well, and I think like, I mean, yes, I feel and felt the same. Like, this is what
Yeah.
to be here. But I think it was like, man, I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 years that, I mean, three even sounds long. So maybe just 2 years that I was doing stuff with AP. And then Norman moved on to Warner Records, and the new publisher like cleaned house and just
Yeah.
like stopped working with everybody that the old, team had been working with.
Yeah.
And I found I got a couple of things here and there, but for the most part, I was just like out.
Hmm.
And it's just like it was like a lesson in just like right place, right time sometimes. Like
Right.
I got lucky that I saw you. I got lucky that Norman was interested and that for some reason we like hit it off enough to where I got to do some work and meet some people. And
Yeah.
that was a couple years. And then it's like for no real reason, it just goes away.
Yeah.
And then you just keep on trucking.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the testament to the journey is,
Yeah.
it's just take your opportunities because you don't know where they're going to lead, and
Right.
then always just be open to the next one. Like I don't think I'm was in the similar boat as you is like you don't say no if someone wants you to shoot something unless you
Right.
can't, but it's just
Yeah. I mean, we all have conflicts or things. I mean,
yeah,
I like, I guess the only like hindsight for me is I wish not that I was like more aggressive back then, uh, but I feel like my approach back then was like, oh, I'm working for this particular band. That means I'm just going to stay here with this band and
right,
not do anything else. And not that I should have like schmoozed or like done anything else, but just for my own, like, I guess, archives, like, there were multiple tours that I went on that I didn't shoot any of the other bands because I was just like, I got to hang out with this band. Like,
right,
this is supposed to be. I don't want to miss anything.
right,
And I'm sad to be like, I was on tour with that band and I didn't shoot a single photo of them. Like, why? I learned that later on,
right,
you know, like years and years later, of being like, oh, I can do both things and it doesn't, I'm not a traitor for doing that.
right.
So
Yeah, and I would think most bands probably wouldn't care if you're like, hey, I want to
totally.
grab a couple
Oh,
shots of these guys. I'm
yeah.
hanging out with them too, for a week.
Right. And I just didn't think of it like that. I was
Yeah,
like green and just like learning everything by like trial and error and not realizing it in the moment. But
yeah,
I feel like like you were saying, like I never wanted to say no to anything back then. Um, because in the beginning, it's just like you don't know what is going to hit or stick
right,
or where you're going to make a connection. Like there were some like poppier acts that I shot for AP that like I really didn't like their music. And if I went off that alone,
yeah,
like, I probably would have missed some opportunities. But like working with those bands and like spending time with them, like they were dope. They were
yeah,
super like kind or fun or funny, or just like it was really cool. Just like how you were saying, like when we'd go in and shoot these things, sometimes you weren't excited about the band, but you knew like you're going to see your friends or whatever.
yeah,
Nice to be able to bump into those bands places, like to
yeah,
be on the East Coast shooting a festival and there they are. And, you know, and sometimes not only is it nice to see, but like sometimes it is like a lifesaver. Like I shot an event, like a festival um, in like the Inland Empire once. And I was doing 2 half day like day in the lives. with bands playing that day. And so I did like a half day that morning with A Day to Remember. And then they played like kind of early in the day, even though they were really big. They weren't,
Yeah.
they were like a younger band. So I did a half day with them, and then I switched over and I did a half day with Rise Against, and they were like the second to last band that night, playing before Blink. And um, because of that, I think security started like cracking down at the end of the night. And so I'd been hanging with them for hours, like in their dressing room. And like I got, driven with them in like the van over to the stage. And I walked up on stage with them and I took, a few photos of them getting ready. And then I wanted to go out front and get some live shots. And after they kicked us all out of the pit after three, then I was like, cool, I'm going to run backstage, jump on stage, finish shooting from over there. Security wouldn't let me back. And I was like, but I'm working with these guys and they don't know that.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm in like a frenzied panic because I'm like, their set just started, like they've played 8 minutes and they're
Right.
still on for like another hour and I'm done, like in my
Yeah.
head. So I'm freaked out. I'm trying to explain, but I don't have any special credentials.
Right. Right.
And so the security guard won't let me through. And all of a sudden, uh, my friend who was working for A Day to Remember, who for years had worked with MXPX, who I worked with, comes up from the backstage area, grabs the security guard by the shoulder, pulls him back, and he's like, this guy has to be back here now. And he grabs me and he pulls me through. And the security guard is like, huh? And then my friend James just goes, go, and pushes me. And he stays there to like explain.
Right.
And I go, thanks, as I'm running off. And I run up on stage and I get to shoot. And it's like, that's why like relationships and all that stuff matter, is like saves us, in
Yeah.
these weird moments. So,
Right. And etiquette and, having good
yeah.
character yourself and,
Right. Like, because in those moments, like, I don't want to be a jerk to the security guard. I totally get he is doing his job and he's
right.
doing his job well because he's
Right.
keeping people out.
Right.
It's just that lack of communication and not knowing how to be able to get across, like, I'm supposed to be there.
Right.
I need, like, so you learn.
What are you up to these days
I
to
have
keep your story going?
yeah, I have a family now. I have 3 kids and a wife. My oldest is about to turn 10, so that's been the last 10 years of my life, is family. um and I have a regular day job, like a remote job, working for a company doing remote work, like assistant work. um but I still shoot some. It's not as much.
Yeah.
uh and it varies in like what it is. Like sometimes I would say a majority of it is commercial, like businesses and things around town. Um, and then it's probably like families and weddings are like the next things. And um, I think what's been interesting and fun though is like I still do music after all these years. It's just not as frequent and it's not technically like work. Like I usually am not getting paid. Um, at least that's not how I set out. Like a lot of it is we come from a scene where a lot of these bands are still at it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the bands that I got to like be friends with in like 2007 are still touring and still playing and we're still friends. So when they come out this way to like Atlanta or Nashville, when it makes sense, I like to go to their show. And I just don't enjoy going to a show if I'm not taking photos. So
Yeah.
I still, go see them, but I'm like, can I get a pass?
Yeah.
Like, can I take some pics? And they all have their person that's on tour with them nowadays. Like when we were doing stuff, nobody had a tour photographer.
No.
Like
Yeah.
it's not a thing back then. I mean, yes, in the big world that existed, but like in our scene, I feel like nobody had a tour photographer in like 2007, 8, 9. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't until people finally saw the need. I don't know if it was like 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there, like social media was really
Yeah.
kicking then. And I think people saw, oh, by having somebody out here making content. Like,
Right.
so yeah, most of those people have their guys, but like, I don't know. I just feel like in a sense is like my hobby, like continuing to like collect like cool live photos,
Right.
and it keeps me connected to it. So it's fun.
Yeah. I was just talking to my wife. I may shoot the JCHC Fest out here
Oh
soon.
yeah. Yeah.
I was, you know, telling my wife, I was just like, at this point, I don't necessarily care to be paid. It's just an opportunity to go to a fun show and
Right.
be a part and just, it's, but I feel the same way. Like, if I don't have a camera in my hand at a show, I don't know what to do.
Every once in a while I go to a show like that.
Yeah.
And it can be okay, but there's also that part of me like I can't not notice, right? So I'm like
Right.
looking around and I'm like, there's no photographer here. Like, why is nobody shooting?
Yeah.
And then you see a moment in the show and
Yeah.
you're like, somebody could have got that
Yeah.
or whatever. Uh, but I think what the like punk scene taught me too is like the DIY ethos, but also just like an authentic like approach to things or a care is like I don't know, it goes a long way. So like I think stockpiling images and things like that, like you never know when a band's gonna come around and be like
Right.
looking for content and they'll take care of you then. Or
Right.
a couple of years back, this like punk hardcore fest resurfaced here in the South. And I saw a handful of my friends' bands were playing the different days. I asked a friend of mine, I was like, hey, do you know how I can get a pass for like the weekend? Because I don't want to go to like one band each day and try to get a pass. Like
Right. Yeah.
you know the
Yeah.
logistics of that. It's annoying. And I was like, so trying to be, more strategic as a grown up. And he was like, why don't you just ask Chad? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it's his festival. And I was like, what? And I realized like it's my friend's festival. So I hit him up and I was like, can I get a pass? Can I shoot this? And he's like, well, we haven't really sorted it out. I don't know what we're doing. Like, I think we're being real, like tight because it's this one time thing. And I was like, no, no, I get it. Then he got back to me and he's like, he had three business partners and he's like, we each picked a photographer. And that's like essentially all that's going to be like covering the festival. And he's like, you're my pick. And I was like, thank you. And so like got to go shoot, but like none of us got paid. We just shot.
Yeah.
And I always want to try to like make something tangible because I've only been a digital photographer.
Right.
Everything lives on your phone, computer, or hard drive. And obviously, when I would shoot stuff for the magazine, it would be in print, but it's like one photo, maybe two
Right.
photos, and like, then those get lost in time. So I was like, we should make a book. This was cool. Like the people who came want it. The people who missed out might want it. Like, and because the festival was supposed to be one time, when I pitched that beforehand, they passed. They were just like not interested, and it made
Right.
some sense.
Yeah.
Um, but the festival did well, and before the end of the weekend, they announced we're going to come back next year. And so my buddy that I had asked, "Hey, can you help me?" He knew I wanted to do that, knew they weren't interested at the time, but he's like, now that they're bringing it back, maybe there's an angle here.
Right.
And so he put some thought into it and pitched an idea to them and they bought it. And then we got paid to make a book. And like I got the other photographers paid uh for their time. And so what went from like no money in a weekend turned into at least some money in a
Right.
weekend.
Yeah.
And we all got to be part of this really cool project of making like a 200-page hard copy like
Right.
historic book, so I think that's like the thing is like you never know what can materialize if you're willing to like again do it yourself, but like come at it from a real angle of like, this was cool. Like this was a festival 20 years ago. It died, but it came back. Like that's awesome that it came back. Uh, let's tell a story. Let's
Yeah.
share that. Well, not from like a I can get rich off this or
Right.
we should monetize them, you know.
Right. Punk rock is not the way to go to get rich.
No,
It's a good way to go to have fun though.
absolutely.
Um, but I think the underlying message of your story, I think, is don't be afraid to ask, because you pitched a lot of things, and some
Yeah, I
things
mean,
said no, and but some things led to many other things, and it just
yeah,
took you
I
asking.
I think it was a matter of asking and a matter of just like meeting people,
Right.
just be like being. I think it was Ethan that told me early on, like he's like, it's cool that you take good photos. He's like, but honestly, that doesn't matter if you want to like work with a band as much as being a good hang matters.
Right.
He's that bands care about that so much more. And so I think I just kept that at the forefront of my mind when it came to working with artists, but also to like meeting other people in this industry is like
Right.
saying it can be a really weird place and it can be really phony. I mean, uh when I started, I picked like all my friends, their websites were like their first and last name. That was like their business name. And I picked my first and middle name to be different. And that became like my professional working name. And people get confused when they find out that that's not my last name.
It
Uh,
confused me for a long time.
yeah. But it was really helpful. There were like a handful of times I would be at things and I could tell that when somebody was like, part of a conversation and they were asking like, so who are you, what's your deal, what's your name, they were fishing, like they wanted to talk to like cool people
Right.
or whatever. And so there were a couple times in those settings where I would be like, oh, my name's Jered, and they'd be like, which Jered who, and I'd be like, Jered Martin. They'd be like, well, I don't know that, and they'd just move along and I'd be like, yeah, I don't want to talk to that person. They don't care to know me, they just want to know me because I'm connected to that band or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Um, and I never wanted to be that to other people. I didn't want
Right.
them that that was. And so I say all that because I feel like I met people when we would go to these things, right? When we go to Warped, when we go to Bamboozle, when we go to whatever, and I'd talk to so and so, and they'd be hanging out with these people, and I'd go and meet their friends, and then at the next event, I would see those people, so I would go out of my way to go up and be like, "Hey, good to see you again," and I feel like that opened a lot of doors too. Like I
Yeah.
met this guy who introduced me to this gal who was running a nonprofit, and but she also worked for this label, and then I was helping her at a festival, and her boss who did A&R at the label was there and needed photos of his band, and so she asked me, and so I got to go shoot main stage, and then
Right.
all of a sudden now I have a relationship with that band, and a year later they're in the studio and they asked me to be, it's like, okay, like
Yeah.
what? So I think like this industry is like super relational.
Yeah.
If
Definitely.
you know if you're genuine, like
Right.
if you're not out there to just like schmooze and network and like in a self-serving way, but if you're
Right.
just nice to people and like authentic, like then I think that also helps. Like, yeah, in my early days, I feel like a lot of things happened just because like I made friends with people and they would recommend me, you
Right.
know.
Well,
So
I mean, even just how we became friends is like that night I told you about AP. I'm like, this is a cool dude. He needs to be out there. I'm
yeah,
like, because you were just authentic and real and like nice, good guy.
yeah, I was probably a little too intense back then too. Like, hey Chad, what's up, man? How are you? Like,
No,
and like,
I don't think you were. I think because I'm not that way. So
right,
usually
yeah, that's
when I'm around those people, I'm like, yeah, get away from me.
back up,
Yeah.
right. which I think
But
I can be that way, but I think you got to read people, right?
yeah,
And when you're just like more calm, it's like
yeah,
trying to match that person's energy and just be like, "What's
yeah.
up, dude? How are you?"
Yeah, and like we just had hung out that night, and I think I remember, meeting you more than the bands,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it was fun. Like I was like, this is a good guy, and then how many 20 years later or something, I still know you, and that's
But I mean,
amazing.
back then we would get to see each other. Like, I don't think you and I, our paths crossed socially a lot because we didn't live super close to
Right.
each other. With me trying to travel and living hours away, you having a regular job at the time to like make it like make sense.
Yeah.
Shows became like the place where we got to
Yeah.
cross paths and hang out,
Yeah.
but often,
Yeah. It
it
was
was,
pretty often.
yeah, it was a lot of shows.
Yeah. It was good times.
Yeah, it's great.
Um, was there anything else you want to add to your story?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of info, but like to end the creating piece and where I'm at, uh, I'm in the final stages of finishing a book of my 15 years of music work. So
Okay.
I've been working on it with my friend Cody, who is a creative director and a designer. And um, I've done enough of my own projects to know and learn from that when I'm in charge of myself, I make the wrong choices.
Right.
And so a couple years ago, I came to him and I said, I really think I want to try to make a book. I don't know why. I don't know what I'm going to do with it or how it's going to get like put out or anything like that. I know I want to try to create this thing because again, I told him the same thing. I have all these photos sitting on a hard drive
Right.
and I want it to be real. And so on and off when we can in like the margins of our lives, we get together and we hack through this process and we are hoping to finish it within like the next 6 weeks.
Oh, nice.
So maybe when this comes out, I'll be done with it, which would be nice. Um, and it would be like moving into like the printing and publishing phase of it. So,
Right.
but it's been cool to like go back and revisit all this work from 2007 to now, and
Right.
and like as we were talking about seeing like different photographers grow or disappear, all that stuff. Like, I think I'm really grateful that I've been able to keep my foot in music enough that I've been shooting it consistently since 2007. And
Right.
so there are a few of those bands that I'm like, man, I have photos of them from that tour that year all the way to this year and this tour. Like, that's wild. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
if anybody has photos of them that many times. And it's not like they're all like crazy photos. It might all just be live photos and stuff, but like
Right.
consistent, like
But it's still
body.
a record.
Yeah, to be like, yeah, from one person to be like, here's them in 2007 and 8, 10, 11, 13, 15, 16. Like,
Yeah.
wow, that's wild. So,
Yeah.
been really fun to like reminisce and go down all that, but to also try to piece together a bit of this story that, I shared with you, but like visually, like
Right.
piece it to be able to like share it with people someday so that
Right.
hopefully some kid is able to like randomly come across this somehow and is maybe reads my little intro and is like, this dude didn't have any business doing this stuff and he
And
just asked and it worked out and
look, he's got a book.
look at these bands that he got to shoot.
Right.
So
I mean,
so
I have some Glenn Friedman books,
yeah, me too.
and it's just like, he wasn't necessarily known throughout the world, but
Right.
if you're into the music that he shot, I
Yep.
mean, he's like the god of that
Right.
genre of photography. And it's like, so, you know, I think the bands that you and I shot, especially you, is like there was such a cult following to
Totally.
these bands, and it's like there's going to be people who want to share that with, you know, their kids or grandkids and be
Right.
like, here's a book. This dude shot them all, you know.
Yeah.
And you could be like, how's that show, that show, that show, you know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's my hope that, and yeah, just being able to show people like this, this story of like, if you're nice, you ask questions, and if you have a little bit of talent, it can take you places.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, that's it.
I mean, that's the beauty of being living that life of creation is like it's just you just keep going.
Yeah.
Doors
Well,
close, you know, a new one opens.
yeah. And I think like I definitely always have and probably always will struggle with like imposter syndrome and like being like, I'm not a like, I mean, when I started this project, I was like, why are none of my friends making a book? Like, I have friends that have a, in my opinion, better body of work. Why are they not doing this? And that was keeping me from doing it.
Right,
And I just realized like, well, just because I make it doesn't mean they couldn't make it. And if they did, doesn't also mean I can't. Like
right,
multiple books can exist. Like,
right,
and just because someone else is not yet doing it doesn't mean that I shouldn't do it. And I think it has helped me see too that like again, going back and like mining through hard drives, like I, I would say I don't like I've watched other photographers like grow and grow and grow and change their style. It not negatively, but like change
right,
their style, adapt, like um experiment, grow, you know, like all this kind of stuff. And when I go back and I look at my stuff, I'm like, I don't see a lot of growth, like maybe technically like little bits
right,
and maybe more so in like post production, right? Like in editing.
right,
But I think the reason for that is like I just knew for myself like what I liked and what I
right,
was setting out to do. And I just essentially wanted to document this world that we kind of grew up in, like in high school and on, and that I felt really, really privileged to like continue to be around.
right,
So I just wanted to document it and like
right,
share like photos with people to be like, remember this show you were at, so that when you look at that picture, you feel that memory, and you're
right,
like, that was a good show. Yes, I remember that. They did this and they played that, and I was with so like I want to be able to help take you back there.
right,
And so that is it to me is like it's less about me trying to like create like crazy works of art, but more so like I want to capture something that either brings you back and like when you see it, you're like, I remember being there, or if it's a band you love but a show you were not at, you're like, damn, I wish I was there.
right,
Like those are the feelings I've been chasing forever. And
right.
I think being able to go back and look at everything has shown me I'm like, I've at least stayed true to that. Like I've just done my thing. Like, and it's worked out moderately, I guess. So
Well, it's funny because I think I'm the same way. I didn't set out to be this like proficiently masterful photographer. I was taking point and shoot cameras into concerts,
yeah,
shot a few, and then jumped and went moshing. Like it
yeah,
wasn't. I'm like I'm just want a memory of the show, and
totally.
then the beauty of and most of the concert shots and most drawn to, they're not technically perfect.
No,
Most of them are like out of focus,
yeah,
blurred, and I'm like, but they capture the energy of the show. So that was always my goal. I'm like, I was telling another guy, I'm like, I know when I found the shot when I can feel the energy of the show.
yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, you know, don't get hung up on perfection and making sure your lighting is beautiful and stuff. You're
Right.
just make it authentic. And I
Yeah,
think,
there could be photos that are super technically sound,
yeah.
feel really cold and stale.
Oh yeah, totally.
And then there are really artsy, cool ones that can also feel like, okay, like I guess that's cool.
Yeah.
There's like a weird sweet spot, right?
Right, yeah.
That like, yep, that person nailed this moment. Like I feel that concert.
Yeah.
I
Like
feel
all
it.
Glenn Friedman's shots,
Yeah.
you're just like half of them are out of focus when you look at it, but you're like you can almost feel the sweat in that room, you know.
Yeah. Totally.
And that's so
Totally.
that was always my goal. It's
Yeah.
just let's just show the energy of the show.
Absolutely.